Hey everybody, welcome back. In the last episode at the Red Barn, we made some great progress on the Ferrari Plenums. I started going after some aesthetic improvements to the engine lid. This episode, I think I need to work on some of the hard mechanical parts. So last time I started mentioning about axle angle and clearance for that exhaust pipe setup. And in order to really understand what I'm going to need, I got to work out ride height and, sort of travel, how much shock travel I'm going to want. So I got to get this thing on the ground. And the nice thing about it is I just pulled the shocks out. And now with it on the quick jacks, I can just raise and lower it to get it to simulate ride height and to simulate, travel and all that good stuff. Yes, the front's not going to go up and down evenly, but that's not as important as understanding what's going on back here. So first thing to do is start playing with getting it on the ground. So that's approximately ride height, and a lot of this is just guesstimate and kind of like how you like the look of the car and all that good stuff. But I usually look for the distance. These are 16-inch wheels, which the car will be running, most probably. Not these wheels, but 16s. And these are the appropriate size tires. I think these are 245s. So anyway, the gap basically from the fender lip to the top of the wheel is just an eyeball look for kind of a starting point. And now what you can see is, at ride height, nothing but clearance for that. So I'm going to now get under the car and start measuring where I am. I'm looking for at least 5 inches of ground clearance under the car. And then I'll work with the suspension guys to determine what they recommend for how much droop and how much upward travel I'm going to need. So when it comes to getting the droop limiters put in that the shocks, I'll be comfortably in range for a street car. All right, to simplify my life, rather than trying to crawl around into the car with a tape measure and worry about accurate readings, I just took a 4x4. It's about 5.5 inches, maybe 5 3/8 to 5.5 inches, depending upon where you measure it. And the nice thing is I can just slide this around underneath the car and see how it fits. And the good news is, at that height that I just accidentally set the car at, it might be a little dark, but look how cool that header looks. Whew. The nice thing about it is, look at that. That's almost 5.5 inches of clearance, and you can see a little bit of room. Gosh, actually like a 1/4 inch at least. And the headers, good or bad, the headers are the essentially the lowest part, and the motor, which again you can't really see, but it's got more clearance. So I'm looking like that is about ride height. It could even go down a teeny bit more, but I don't like the look of a 914 that's too low. They start looking not slammed, but looks like you're trying too hard. So approximately here is good. And now what that gives me the ability to do is get honest about this axle angle. And you can see it's not that bad. I don't know how this comes through on video. That the earlier video, it made it look like it was like a foot below it. It was quite scary because it's like, that's a 45-degree axle angle. It's not that bad. So now what I can do is I'll measure, once I figure out what the droop is, I'll get a measurement from that as the quote longest that the axle needs to get. And then once it comes up, I don't know that I'm actually going to get it even with the output shaft, but that'll give me my shortest distance. And then that's what the axle manufacturers need to know and the CV joint guys need to know. All right, let's start with a semi-unscientific measurement. I know that I have to account for where the CV joint really is, so this is going to be a little steeper, but down here I'm way below where that CV joint input might go. So if I was to go kind of center to center-ish, because that the CV joint, let me see if I can do this without dropping everything. I'm just trying to come up with an approximation to keep myself from being too scared about this angle. 13. Standard 930 CV joint is a 22-degree joint, so we're pretty good. And I know it's never going to get above that. If I start lowering, if I start worrying about travel up, it's only going to get less. So this is why you see I wanted to limit the droop. because I'm gonna jack the car up and then I'm gonna remeasure to see if I've got it where I need it to be for droop. So just for fun, if that was where I wanted it, that's right at 22 if I have that much droop. So I'm going to now see if I can figure out how much that is. Okay, well, according to my precise calculations, that was 3.5 inches of droop. And I don't know that I even need that much. I mean, I'll have to talk to the suspension guys, but if I limit it to 3.5 inches of droop, I'm clear for pretty much everything I need. And then it's a matter of upward wheel travel and how much the shocks can be, how much more the shocks can be messed with, because I'm getting all excited about these axles. So now it's time to start working out the exact length I'm going to need. The way this works is these have what are called plunging CVs. This is just a throwaway part that I use for mock-up, but this is a 108 millimeter Porsche CV joint, which fantastically is the exact same bolt pattern as what the Ferrari uses. That's not really surprising in that you can't imagine manufacturers making their own CV joints, but that's good news. And these are what are called plunging CVs. You can see that the axle can go in and out, and this is where it's allowing the axle length to change as it's moving through its arc. But this car currently has 100 millimeter 911 stub axles. This is an example of one. So I need 108 millimeter stub axles, and I've sourced a set of those, so hopefully those will be here soon. But the way this works is you have to measure the shortest distance that will ever occur between the CVs. What you end up doing is, you might think, I thought, you measure from, the CV flange on the one side to the, the CV flange once it's in position. But after talking to the folks I'm going to be working with at McKinsey's Performance, a great group of people, super helpful. But what they tell you to do is, and you can see what's going on here, you don't want this surface. You want the innermost surface that plunge is going to take up. And I'm just, I don't know what the right term for this is. I'm calling it the pocket. So what you want is to measure from this surface to the corresponding surface on the stub axle. And you subtract, like a 1/4 inch. And what that means is that, you end up with the worst possible case of a straight line between the output shaft or the output flange on the transmission and the stub axle in the trailing arm in this case. And with that little bit of distance, that means that axle can still float, because you can imagine if that was coming up and it was too long, it would either try to jam itself through the transmission or it would try to jam itself into the stub axle. Either one of those is a bad thing. So I'm kind of stuck until I get my stub axle setup going. But now I know exactly what's going on there. And the other thing is that McKinsey's takes a stock 930 CV joint and they modify it a little bit, and you pick up even a little bit more angle capability. And I reviewed what my system was and the range, and I'm completely well within range. So there's no worries about anything about the actual angles here. So now really the factor or the focus is going to have to shift to working out exactly how much droop I can run in the rear shocks, and then that'll get all squared away. Okay, I'm jumping in sort of out of time sequence with a thought I had that may be of interest, and that is, if the suspension place limits me based on how much you can actually do inside these shock bodies with the droop limiters, if I can't get enough droop limit out of the shock, my other option is I can raise this upper shock mount up to about 2 inches, and the target top will still be able to stow in here. So that may be something we need to do. The good news is I can either cut the stock component out and raise it up, or I can contact our friends at Tangerine Racing, Mr. Chris Foley, and I can end up with an upper shock mount raising kit that Chris makes. It's a beautiful piece of kit. It's this metal sleeve here with a reinforcement and this nice hat. And that I can, I can adjust, if you will. I can slide this up and down to the height I need it. The downside of this is it's all hard mounted. There's no rubber bushings in here. And while that's not the end of the world, on the Ferrari build, I'm gonna try to keep it as nice a ride as I can. It's not that this car doesn't ride nicely, but it's absolutely, it's not real compliant. It's got a bit of, if you want to call it, harshness, because there's no rubber. Well, there's rubber, in the shock mount at the bottom. There's a bushing there, but the whole rest of the suspension in this car has no rubber in it. And I'm going to go a different way with the Ferrari build. But there you go. So I think our problems are going to be solved. It's just a question of, can I get away with it all in the shock, or am I going to have to modify that upper mount? We shall see. But really the main reason, one of the key reasons I want this axle setup done is you can see that, now again, this is fake, beyond full droop, or right about full droop, but if there's an axle in here, where can I go with my muffler, right? I'm probably going to go under the axle. So there's a bunch of stuff that has to happen in here. So the order I think it's going to have to be is get my shocks figured out so I know exactly where full droop is. I need to make sure I coordinate that with, the workable CV angles. But once I've got the shocks and the axles in here, I also need to have a brace from this component, which, by the way, to remind you, supports that link at the base of the transaxle. And all it does is bolt to the rear of the engine cradle up there. So it's completely able to flop, which is not acceptable, obviously. So I got to run a brace from here to somewhere strong, yet to be determined exactly. But axles, brace, exhaust system, there's a few things that have to happen down in here, and I can't just guess at any one of them. I got to go in the right order. So I think I've got that order figured out. And I got to get over to the suspension shop here later this week. And I got to get my stub axles here and installed. And then I can measure for axles. So it's all coming together. And after a bit of filing and sanding, there's what the corner looks like. And here you can get a look at how the different patches turned out. I may go after tidying that up a little bit, but it's going to be completely invisible when it's on the car, as is some of this stuff up here, but maybe a little bit more tidying up. But there's the patches. There are the patches. And again, when it's in the car, that's what you're going to see. You'll see about that much of that corner, and you'll see about that much of that corner, and neither can be seen at the same time, which is always great when it comes to asymmetry. Anyway, let's go put this in the car and actually take a look. And as I said, you can see that you can't see. And even if you get really, stick your head in here, you still can't see. And even if you try to peek down from the top, it's dark and you can't see. So, same deal on this side. It looks like it's not patched at all. All right, awesome, very cool. So for now, that is the plenums done. Oh, still have to add the map sensor, and got to work out where that's going to go, try to hide that someplace. And then it's on to other stuff. So that's it for this episode. I appreciate you guys watching, and leave me a comment or any questions down below, and y'all take care. We'll talk to you real soon. Bye-bye.